money. They were all obviously relieved when they realized that they would see me only once a week. And they were still more relieved when I said it won't be necessary anymore. They never asked why. They congratulated me, and that was all. Often the reason was I had found a better host. I could afford to scratch off the ones who were a pain in the ass. But that thought never occurred to them. Finally I had a steady, solid program, a fixed schedule. On Tuesdays I knew it would be this kind of a meal, and on Fridays that kind. Kronstadt, I knew, would have champagne for me and homemade apple pie. And Carl would invite me out, take me to a different restaurant each time, order rare wines, invite me to the theater afterwards, or take me to the Cirque Madrano. They were curious about one another, my hosts. Would ask me which place I liked best, who was the best cook, etc. I think I liked Kronstadt's joint best of all, perhaps because he chalked the meal up on the wall each time. Not that it eased my conscience to see what I owed him, because I had no intention of paying him back, nor had he any illusions about being requited. No, it was the odd numbers which intrigued me. He used to figure it out to the last centime. If I was to pay in full I would have had to break a sou. His wife was a marvelous cook and she didn't give a fuck about those centimes. Kronstadt added up. She took it out of me in carbon copies. A fact. If I hadn't any fresh carbons for her when I showed up, she was crestfallen. And for that I would have to take the little girl to the Luxembourg. Next day, play with her for 2 or 3 hours, a task which drove me wild because she spoke nothing but Hungarian and French. They were a queer lot on the whole, my hosts. At Tanya's I look down on the spread from the balcony. Moldorf is there, sitting beside his idol. He is warming his feet at the hearth, a monstrous look of gratitude in his watery eyes. Tanya is running over the adagio. The adagio says very distinctly, no more words of love. I am at the fountain again, watching the turtles pissing green milk. Sylvester has just come back from Broadway with a heart full of love. All night I was lying on a bench outside the mall while the globe was sprayed with warm turtle piss and the horses stiffened with Priapic 96. Fury galloped like mad without ever touching the ground. All night long I smell the lilacs in the little dark room where she is taking down her hair, the lilacs that I bought for her as she went to meet Sylvester. He came back with a heart full of love, she said, and the lilacs are in her hair, her mouth, they are choking her armpits. The room is swimming with love and turtle piss. And warm lilacs, and the horses are galloping like mad. In the morning dirty teeth and scum on the window panes, the little gate that leads to the mall is locked. People are going to work and the shutters are rattling like coats of mail. In the bookstore opposite the fountain is the story of Lake Chad. The silent lizards, the gorgeous gamboge tints. 97 all the letters I wrote her. Drunken ones with a blunt stub, crazy ones with bits of charcoal, little pieces. From bench to bench, firecrackers, doilies, tutti frutti, they will be going over them now, together, and he will compliment me one day. He will say, as he flicks his cigar ash, really, you write quite well. Let's see, you're a surrealist, aren't you? Dry, brittle voice, teeth full of dandruff, solo for solar. Plexus, G for Gaga. Up on the balcony with the rubber plant and the adagio going on down. Below. The keys are black and white, then black, then white and black. And you want to know if you can play something for me? Yes, play. Something with those big thumbs of yours. Play the adagio since that's the only goddamned thing you know. Play it, and then cut off your big thumbs. That adagio. I don't know why she insists on playing it all the time. The old piano wasn't good enough for her, she had to rent a concert grand for the adagio. When I see her big thumbs pressing the keyboard and that silly rubber plant beside me, I feel like that madman of the north who threw his clothes away and, sitting naked in the wintry boughs, threw nuts down into the herring frozen sea. There is something exasperating about this movement, something abortively melancholy about it, as if it had been written in lava, as if it had the color of lead and milk mixed. And Sylvester, with his head cocked to one side like an auctioneer, Sylvester says, "Play that other one you were practicing today. It's beautiful to have a smoking jacket, a good cigar and a wife who plays the piano. So relaxing. So lenitive. Between the acts you go out for a smoke and a breath of fresh air." Yes, her fingers are very supple, extraordinarily supple. She does batik work too. Would you like to try a Bulgarian cigarette? I say, pigeon breast, what's that? Other movement I like so well? The scherzo. Ah, yes, the scherzo. Excellent, the scherzo. Count Waldemar von Schwisnienzug speaking. Cool, dandruff eyes. Halitosis. Gaudy socks. And crotons in the pea soup. If you please. We always have pea soup Friday nights. Won't you try a little red wine? The red wine goes with the meat, you know. A dry, crisp voice. Have a cigar, won't you? Yes, I like my work, but I don't attach any importance to it. My next play will involve a pluralistic conception of the universe. Revolving drums with calcium lights. O'Neill is dead. I think, dear, you should lift your foot from the pedal more frequently. Yes, that part is very nice, don't you think? Yes, the characters go around with microphones in their trousers. The locale is in Asia, because the atmospheric conditions are more conducive. Would you like to try a little anjou? We bought it especially for you. All through the meal this patter continues. It feels exactly as if he had taken out that circumcised dick of his and was peeing on us. Tanya is bursting with the strain. Ever since he came back with a heart full of love, this monologue has been going on. He talks while he's undressing, she tells me, a steady stream of warm piss, as though his bladder had been punctured. When I think of Tanya crawling into bed with this busted bladder, I get enraged. To think that a poor, withered bastard with those cheap Broadway plays up his sleeve should be pissing on the woman I love. Calling for red wine and revolving drums and crotons in his pea soup. The cheek of him. To think that he can lie beside that furnace I stoked for him and do nothing but make water. My God, man, you ought to get down on your knees and thank me. Don't you see that you have a woman in your house now? Can't you see? She's bursting. You telling me? With those strangulated Adenoids of yours. Well now, I'll tell you, there's 2 ways of looking at that. Fuck your 2 ways of looking at things. Fuck your pluralistic universe, and your Asiatic acoustics. Don't hand me your red wine or your anju, hand her over, she belongs to me. You go sit by the fountain, and let me smell the lilacs. Pick the dandruff from out of your eyes, and take that damned adagio and wrap it in a pair of flannel pants. And the other little movement. 2. All the little movements that you make with your weak bladder. You smile at me so confidently, so calculatingly. I'm flattering the ass off you. Can't you tell? While I listen to your crap, she's got her hand on me, but you don't see that. You think I like to suffer, that's my role, you say. Okay. Ask her about it. She'll tell you how I suffer. Your cancer and delirium. She said over the phone the other day. She's got it now, the cancer and delirium, and soon you'll have to pick the scabs. Her veins are bursting, I tell you, and your talk is all sawdust. No matter how much you piss away, you'll never plug up the holes. What did Mr. Wren say? Words are loneliness, I left a couple of words for you on the tablecloth last night, you covered them with your elbows. He's put a fence around her as if she were a dirty, stinking bone of a saint. If he only had the courage to say take her, perhaps a miracle would occur. Just that. Take her. And I swear everything would come out all right. Besides, maybe I wouldn't take her. Did that ever occur to him, I wonder? Or I might take her for a while and hand her back, improved. But putting up a fence around her, that won't work. You can't put a fence around a human being. It ain't done anymore. You think, you poor, withered bastard, that I'm no good for her, that I might pollute her, desecrate her. You don't know how palatable is a polluted woman, how a change of semen can make a woman bloom. You think a heart full of love is enough, and perhaps it is, for the right woman, but you haven't got a heart anymore, you are nothing but a big, empty bladder. You are sharpening your teeth and cultivating your growl. You run at her heels like a watchdog and you piddle 102 everywhere. She didn't take you for a watchdog, she took you for a poet. You were a poet once, she said. And now what are you? Courage, Sylvester. Courage. Take the microphone out of your pants. Put your hind leg down. And stop making water everywhere. Courage, I say, because she's ditched you already. She's contaminated, I tell you, and you might as well take down the fence. No use asking me politely if the coffee doesn't taste like carbolic acid, that won't scare me away. Put rat poison in the coffee, and a little ground glass. Make some boiling hot urine and drop a few nutmegs in it. It is a communal life I have been living for the last few weeks. I have had to share myself with others, principally with some crazy Russians, a drunken Dutchman, and a big Bulgarian woman named Olga. Of the Russians there are chiefly Eugene and Anatole. It was just a few days ago that Olga got out of the hospital where she had her tubes burned out and lost a little excess weight. However, she doesn't look as if she had gone through much suffering. She weighs almost as much as a camel-backed locomotive, she drips with perspiration, has halitosis, and still wears her Circassian wig that looks like Excelsior. She has 2 big warts on her chin from which there sprouts a clump of little hairs. She is growing a mustache. The day after Olga was released from the hospital, she commenced making shoes again. At 6 in the morning she is at her bench. She knocks out 2 pairs of shoes a day. Eugene complains that Olga is a burden, but the truth is that Olga is supporting Eugene and his wife with her 2 pairs of shoes a day. If Olga doesn't work, there is no food. So everyone endeavors to pull Olga to bed on time, to give her enough food to keep going, etc. Every meal starts off with soup. Whether it be onion soup, tomato soup, vegetable soup, or whatnot, the soup always tastes the same. Mostly it tastes as if a dish rag had been stewed in it, slightly sour, mildewed, scummy. I see Eugene hiding it away in the commode after the meal. It stays there, rotting away, until the next meal. The butter, too, is hidden away in the commode. After 3 days it tastes like the big toe of a cadaver. The smell of rancid butter frying is not particularly appetizing, especially when the cooking is done in a room in which there is not the slightest form of ventilation. No sooner than I open the door I feel ill. But Eugene, as soon as he hears me coming, usually opens the shutters and pulls back the bed sheet, which is strung up like a fishnet to keep out the sunlight. Poor Eugene! He looks about the room at the few sticks of furniture, at the dirty bed sheets and the wash basin with the dirty water still in it, and he says, "I am a slave." Every day he says it, not once, but a dozen times. And then he takes his guitar from the wall and sings. But about the smell of rancid butter, there are good associations too. When I think of this rancid butter, I see myself standing in a little, old world courtyard, a very smelly, very dreary courtyard. Through the cracks in the shutters strange figures peer out at me, old women with shawls, dwarfs, rat-faced pimps, bent Jews, midinets, 104 bearded idiots. They totter out into the courtyard to draw water or to rinse the slop pails. 105 One day, Eugene asked me if I would empty the pail for him. I took it to the corner of the yard. There was a hole in the ground and some dirty paper lying around the hole. The little well was slimy with excrement, which in English is shit. I tipped the pail and there was a foul, gurgling splash followed by another. An unexpected splash. When I returned, the soup was dished out. All through the meal I thought of my toothbrush. It is getting old and the bristles get caught in my teeth. When I sit down to eat I always sit near the window. I am afraid to sit on the other side of the table. It is too close to the bed and the bed is crawling. I can see blood stains on the grey sheets if I look that way, but I try not to look that way. I look out on the courtyard where they are rinsing the slop pails. The meal is never complete without music. As soon as the cheese is passed around, Eugene jumps up and reaches for the guitar which hangs over the bed. It is always the same song. He says he has 15 or 16 songs in his repertoire, but I have never heard more than 3. His favorite is Chanant Pomme d'amour. It is full of angoisse and tristesse. 106. In the afternoon we go to the cinema, which is cool and dark. Eugene sits at the piano in the big pit and I sit on a bench up front. The house is empty. But Eugene sings as if he had for audience all the crowned heads of Europe. The garden door is open and the odor of wet leaves sops in, and the rain blends with Eugene's angoisse and tristesse. At midnight, after the spectators have saturated the hall with perspiration and foul breath, I return to sleep on a bench. The exit light, swimming in a halo of tobacco smoke, sheds a faint light on the lower corner of the asbestos curtain. I close my eyes every night on an artificial eye. Standing in the courtyard with a glass eye, only half the world intelligible. The stones are wet and mossy, and in the crevices are black toads. A big door bars the entrance to the cellar. The steps are slippery and soiled with bat dung. The door bulges and sags, the hinges are falling off, but there is an enameled sign on it, in perfect condition, which says, "Be sure to close the door." Why close the door? I can't make it out. I look again at the sign. But it is removed. In its place there is a pane of colored glass. I take out my artificial eye, spit on it and polish it with my handkerchief. A woman is sitting on a dais above an immense carven desk. She has a snake around her neck. The entire room is lined with books and strange fish swimming in colored globes. There are maps and charts on the wall, maps of Paris before the plague, maps of the antique world, of Knossos and Carthage, of Carthage before and after the salting. In a corner of the room I see an iron bedstead, and on it a corpse is lying. The woman gets up wearily, removes the corpse from the bed and absent-mindedly throws it out the window. She returns to the huge carven desk, takes a goldfish from the bowl and swallows it. Slowly the room begins to revolve and one by one the continents slide into the sea. Only the woman is left, but her body is a mass of geography. I lean out the window and the Eiffel Tower is fizzing champagne. It is built entirely of numbers and shrouded in black lace. The sewers are gurgling furiously. There are nothing but roofs everywhere, laid out with execrable geometric cunning. I have been ejected from the world like a cartridge. A deep fog has settled down, the earth is smeared with frozen grease. I can feel the city palpitating, as if it were a heart just removed from a warm body. The windows of my hotel are festering and there is a thick, acrid stench as of chemicals burning. Looking into the Seine I see mud and desolation, street lamps drowning, men and women choking to death, the bridges covered with houses, slaughterhouses of love. A man is standing against a wall with an accordion strapped to his belly. His hands are cut off at the wrists, but the accordion writhes between his stamps like a sack of snakes. The universe has dwindled, it is only a block long and there are no stars, no trees, no rivers. The people who live here are dead, they make chairs which other people sit on in their dreams. In the middle of the street is a wheel, and in the hub of the wheel a gallows is fixed. People already dead are trying frantically to mount the gallows, but the wheel is turning too fast. Something was needed to put me right with myself. Last night I discovered it, Papini. It doesn't matter to me whether he's a chauvinist, a little Christer, or a nearsighted pedant. As a failure he's marvelous. The books he read at 18. Not only Homer, Dante, Goethe, not only Aristotle, Plato, Epictetus, not only Rabelais, Cervantes, Swift, not only Walt Whitman, Edgar Allan Poe, Baudelaire, Villon, Carducci, Manzoni, Lope de Vega, not only Nietzsche, Schopenhauer, Kant, Hegel, Darwin, Spencer. Huxley. Not only these but all the small fry in between. This on page 18. Allors, on page 232 he breaks down and confesses. I know nothing, he admits. I know the titles, I have compiled bibliographies, I have written critical essays, I have maligned and defamed. I can talk for 5 minutes or for 5 days, but then I give out, I am squeezed dry. Follows this, everybody wants to see me. Everybody insists on talking to me. People pester me and they pester others with inquiries about what I am doing. How am I? Am I quite well again? Do I still go for my walks in the country? Am I working? Have I finished my book? Will I begin another soon? A skinny monkey of a German wants me to translate his works. A wild-eyed Russian girl wants me to write an account of my life for her. An American lady wants the very latest news about me. An American gentleman will send his carriage to take me to dinner, just an intimate, confidential talk, you know. An old schoolmate and chum of mine, of 10 years ago, wants me to read him all that I write as fast as I write it. A painter friend I know expects me to pose for him by the hour. A newspaper man wants my present address. An acquaintance, a mystic, inquires about the state of my soul. Another, more practical, about the state of my pocketbook. The president of my club wonders if I will make a speech for the boys. A lady, spiritually inclined, hopes I will come to her house for tea as often as possible. She wants to have my opinion of Jesus Christ, and what do I think of that new medium? Great God! What have I turned into? What right have you people to clutter up my life, steal my time, probe my soul, suckle my thoughts, have me for your companion, confidant, and information bureau? What do you take me for? Am I an entertainer on salary, required every evening to play an intellectual farce under your stupid noses? Am I a slave, bought and paid for, to crawl on my belly in front of you idlers and lay at your feet all that I do and all that I know? Am I a wench in a brothel who is called upon to lift her skirts or take off her chemise at the bidding of the first man in a tailored suit who comes along? I am a man who would live an heroic life and make the world more endurable in his own sight, if, in some moment of weakness, of relaxation, of need, I blow off steam. A bit of red-hot rage cooled off in words, a passionate dream, wrapped and tied in imagery. Well, take it or leave it. But don't bother me. I am a free man and I need my freedom. I need to be alone. I need to ponder my shame and my despair in seclusion. I need the sunshine and the paving stones of the streets without companions, without conversation. Face to face with myself, with only the music of my heart for company. What do you want of me? When I have something to say, I put it in print. When I have something to give, I give it. Your prying curiosity turns my stomach. Your compliments humiliate me. Your tea poisons me. I owe nothing to any one. I would be responsible to God alone if He existed. It seems to me Papini misses something by a hair's breadth when he talks of the need to be alone. It is not difficult to be alone if you are poor and a failure. An artist is always alone if he is an artist. No, what the artist needs is loneliness. The artist, I call myself. So be it. A beautiful nap this afternoon that put velvet between my vertebrae. Generated enough ideas to last me 3 days. Chock full of energy and nothing to do about it. Decide to go for a walk. In the street I change my mind. Decide to go to the movies. Can't go to the movies short a few sous. A walk then. At every movie house I stop and look at the billboards, then at the price list. Cheap enough, these opium joints, but I'm short just a few sous. If it weren't so late I might go back and cash an empty bottle. By the time I get to the Rue Amélie I've forgotten all about the movies. Rue Amélie is one of my favorite streets. It is one of those streets which by good fortune the municipality has forgotten to pave. Huge cobblestones, spreading convexly from one side of the street to the other. Only 1 block long and narrow. The Hotel Pretty is on this street. There is a little church, too, on the Rue Amélie. It looks as though it were made especially for the President of the Republic and his private family. It's good occasionally to see a modest little church. Paris is full of pompous cathedrals. Pont Alexander III. A great wind-swept space approaching the bridge. Gaunt bare trees mathematically fixed in their iron grates, the gloom of the Invalides welling out of the dome and overflowing the dark streets adjacent to the square. The morgue of poetry. They have him where they want him. Now, the great warrior, the last big man of Europe. He sleeps soundly in his granite bed. No fear of him turning over in his grave. The doors are well bolted, the lid is on tight. Sleep, Napoleon. It was not your ideas they wanted. It was only your corpse. The river is still swollen, muddy, streaked with lights. I don't know what it is rushes up in me at the sight of this dark, swift-moving current. But a great exultation lifts me up, affirms the deep wish that is in my never to leave this land. I remember passing this way the other morning on my way to the American Express, knowing in advance that there would be no mail for me, no check, no cable. Nothing, nothing. A wagon from the Galeries Lafayette was rumbling over the bridge. The rain had stopped and the sun, breaking through the soapy clouds, touched the glistening rubble of roofs with a cold fire. I recall now how the driver leaned out and looked up the river towards Passy Way. Such a healthy, simple, approving glance, as if he were saying to himself, "Ah, spring is coming." And God knows, when spring comes to Paris the humblest mortal alive must feel that he dwells in paradise. But it was not only this, it was the intimacy with which his eye rested upon the scene. It was his Paris. A man does not need to be rich, nor even a citizen, to feel this way about Paris. Paris is filled with poor people. The proudest and filthiest lot of beggars that ever walked the earth, it seems to me. And yet they give the illusion of being at home. It is that which distinguishes the Parisian from all other metropolitan souls. When I think of New York I have a very different feeling. New York makes even a rich man feel his unimportance. New York is cold, glittering, malign. The buildings dominate. There is a sort of atomic frenzy to the activity going on. The more furious the pace, the more diminished the spirit. A constant ferment, but it might just as well be going on in a test tube. Nobody knows what it's all about. Nobody directs the energy. Stupendous. Bizarre. Baffling. A tremendous reactive urge, but absolutely uncoordinated. When I think of this city where I was born and raised, this Manhattan that Whitman sang of, a blind, white rage licks my guts. New York. The white prisons, the sidewalks swarming with maggots, the bread lines, the opium joints that are built like palaces, the kikes that are there, the lepers, the thugs, and above all, the ennui, the monotony of faces, streets, legs, houses, skyscrapers, meals, posters, jobs, crimes, loves. A whole city erected over a hollow pit of nothingness. Meaningless. Absolutely meaningless. And 42nd Street? The top of the world, they call it. Where's the bottom then? You can walk along with your hand out and they'll put cinders 109 in your cap. Rich or poor, they walk along with head thrown back and they almost break their necks looking up at their beautiful white prisons. They walk along like blind geese and the searchlights spray their empty faces with flecks of ecstasy. Life, said Emerson, consists in what a man is thinking all day. If that be so, then my life is nothing but a big intestine. I not only think about food all day, but I dream about it at night. But I don't ask to go back to America, to be put in double harness again, to work the treadmill. No, I prefer to be a poor man of Europe. God knows, I am poor enough, it only remains to be a man. Last week I thought the problem of living was about to be solved. Thought I was on the way to becoming self-supporting. It happened that I ran across another Russian Serge is his name. He lives in Schuersens, where there is a little colony of emigres and run-down artists. Before the revolution Serge was a captain in the Imperial Guard. He stands 6'3" in his stockinged feet and drinks vodka like a fish. His father was an admiral, or something like that, on the battleship Potemkin. I met Serge under rather peculiar circumstances. Sniffing about for food, I found myself towards noon the other day in the neighborhood of the Folies Bergère, the back entrance, that is to say, in the narrow little lane with an iron gate at one end. I was dawdling about the stage entrance, hoping vaguely for a casual brush with one of the butterflies, when an open truck pulls up to the sidewalk. Seeing me standing there with my hands in my pockets, the driver, who was Serge, asks me if I would give him a hand unloading the iron barrels. When he learns that I am an American and that I'm broke, he almost weeps with joy. He has been looking high and low for an English teacher, it seems. I help him roll the barrels of insecticide inside and I look my fill at the butterflies fluttering about the wings. The incident takes on strange proportions to me: the empty house, the sawdust dolls bouncing in the wings, the barrels of germicide, the battleship Potemkin above all. Serge's gentleness. He is big and tender, a man every inch of him, but with a woman's heart. In the café nearby, Café des Artistes, he proposes immediately to put me up, says he will put a mattress on the floor in the hallway. For the lessons he says he will give me a meal every day, a big Russian meal, or if for any reason the meal is lacking, then 5 francs. It sounds wonderful to me, wonderful. The only question is, how will I get from Schuersons to the American Express every day. Serge insists that we begin at once. He gives me the car fare to get out to Schuersons in the evening. I arrive a little before dinner, with my knapsack, in order to give Serge a lesson. There are some guests on hand already. Seems as though they always eat in a crowd, everybody chipping in. There are 8 of us at the table and 3 dogs. The dogs eat first. They eat oatmeal. Then we commence. We eat oatmeal too as an Horst Ovra. Chez nous, says Serge, with a twinkle in his eye, c'est pour les chiens, les Quaker oats. ICI pour les gentlemen. Cava. After the oatmeal, mushroom soup and vegetables, after that bacon omelette, fruit, red wine, vodka, coffee, cigarettes. Not bad, the Russian meal. Everyone talks with his mouth full. Toward the end of the meal, Serge's wife, who is a lazy slut of an Armenian, flops on the couch and begins to nibble bonbons. She fishes around in the box with her fat fingers, nibbles a tiny piece to see if there is any juice inside, and then throws it on the floor for the dogs. The meal over, the guests rush away. They rush away precipitously, as if they feared a plague. Serge and I are left with the dogs. His wife has fallen asleep on the couch. Serge moves about unconcernedly, scraping the garbage together for the dogs. Dogs like very much, he says. Very good. 4 dogs. Little dog, he has worms, he too young yet. He bends down to examine some white worms lying on the carpet between the dog's paws. Tries to explain about the worms in English, but his vocabulary is lacking. Finally he consults the dictionary. Ah, he says, looking at me exultantly, tapeworms. My response is evidently not very intelligent. Serge is confused. He gets down on his hands and knees to examine them better. He picks one up and lays it on the table beside the fruit. Hey, him not very big, he grunts. Next lesson you learn. Me worms, no? You are good teacher. I make progress with you. Lying on the mattress in the hallway, the odor of the germicide stifles me. A pungent, acrid odor that seems to invade every pore of my body. The food begins to repeat on me: the Quaker oats, the mushrooms, the bacon, the fried apples. I see the little tapeworm lying beside the fruit and all the varieties of worms that Serge drew on the tablecloth to explain what was the matter with the dog. I see the empty pit of the Folies Bergère, and in every crevice there are cockroaches and lice and bed bugs. I see people scratching themselves frantically, scratching and scratching until the blood comes. I see the worms crawling over the scenery like an army of red ants, devouring everything in sight. I see the chorus girls throwing away their gauze tunics and running through the aisles naked. I see the spectators in the pit throwing off their clothes also and scratching each other like monkeys. I try to quiet myself. After all, this is a home I've found, and there's a meal waiting for me every day. And Serge is a brick, there's no doubt about that. But I can't sleep. It's like going to sleep in a morgue. The mattress is saturated with embalming fluid. It's a morgue for lice, bed bugs, cockroaches, tapeworms. I can't stand it. I won't stand it. After all, I'm a man, not a louse. In the morning I wait for Serge to load the truck. I ask him to take me into Paris. I haven't the heart to tell him I'm leaving. I leave the knapsack behind. With the few things that were left me. When we get to the place prior I jump out. No particular reason for getting off here. No particular reason for anything. I'm free, that's the main thing. Light as a bird I flit about from one quarter to another. It's as though I had been released from prison. I look at the world with new eyes. Everything interests me profoundly. Even trifles. On the Rue du Faubourg Poissonnière. I stop before the window of a physical culture establishment. There are photographs showing specimens of manhood before and after. All frogs. Some of them are nude, except for a pince-nez or a beard. Can't understand how these birds fall for parallel bars and dumbbells. A frog should have just a wee bit of a paunch, like the Baron de Charles. 113 He should wear a beard and a pince-nez, but he should never be photographed in the nude. He should wear twinkling patent leather boots, and in the breast pocket of his sack coat there should be a white handkerchief protruding about 3/4 of an inch above the vent. If possible, he should have a red ribbon in his lapel, through the buttonhole. He should wear pajamas on going to bed. Approaching the place Clichy toward evening, I pass the little whore with the wooden stump who stands opposite the Gaumont Palace day in and day out. She doesn't look a day over 18. Has her regular customers, I suppose. After midnight she stands there in her black rig, rooted to the spot. Back of her is the little alleyway that blazes like an inferno. Passing her now with a light heart, she reminds me somehow of a goose tied to a stake, a goose with a diseased liver, so that the world may have its pate de foie gras. Must be strange taking that wooden stump to bed with you. One imagines all sorts of things, splinters, etc. However, every man to his taste. Going down the Rue des Dames I bump into Peckover, another poor devil who works on the paper. He complains of getting only 3 or 4 hours sleep a night, has to get up at 8 in the morning to work at a dentist's office. It isn't for the money he's doing it, so he explains it's for to buy himself a set of false teeth. It's hard to read proof when you're dropping with sleep, he says. The wife, she thinks I've got a cinch of it. What would we do if you lost your job? She says. But Peckover doesn't give a damn about the job. It doesn't even allow him spending money. He has to save his cigarette butts and use them for pipe tobacco. His coat is held together with pins. He has halitosis and his hands sweat. And only 3 hours sleep a night. It's no way to treat a man, he says. And that boss of mine, he balls the piss out of me if I miss a semicolon. Speaking of his wife, he adds, that woman of mine, she's got no fucking gratitude, I tell you. In parting I manage to worm a franc 50 out of him. I try to squeeze another 50 centimes out of him, but it's impossible. Anyway, I've got enough for a coffee and croissants. Near the Gare Saint-Lazare there's a bar with reduced prices. As luck would have it, I find a ticket in the lavabo for a concert. Light as a feather. Now I go there to the salle. Gave vo. The usher looks ravaged, because I overlook giving him his little tip. Every time he passes me he looks at me inquiringly, as if perhaps I will suddenly remember. It's so long since I've sat in the company of well-dressed people that I feel a bit panic-stricken. I can still smell the formaldehyde. Perhaps Serge makes deliveries here too. But nobody is scratching himself, thank God. A faint odor of perfume, very faint. Even before the music begins there is that bored look on people's faces. A polite form of self-imposed torture, the concert. For a moment, when the conductor raps with his little wand, there is a tense spasm of concentration followed almost immediately by a general slump, a quiet vegetable sort of repose induced by the steady, uninterrupted drizzle from the orchestra. My mind is curiously alert, it's as though my skull had 1,000 mirrors inside it. My nerves are taut, vibrant. The notes are like glass balls dancing on a million jets of water. I've never been to a concert before on such an empty belly. Nothing escapes me, not even the tiniest pin falling. It's as though I had no clothes on and every pore of my body was a window and all the windows open and the light flooding my gizzards. I can feel the light curving under the vault of my ribs and my ribs hang there over a hollow nave trembling with reverberations. How long this lasts I have no idea, I have lost all sense of time and place. After what seems like an eternity there follows an interval of semi-consciousness balanced by such a calm that I feel a great lake inside me, a lake of iridescent sheen, cool as jelly, and over this lake, rising in great swooping spirals, there emerge great flocks of birds, huge birds of passage with long slim legs and brilliant plumage. Flock after flock surge up from the cool, still surface of the lake and, passing under my clavicles, lose themselves in the white sea of space. And then slowly, very slowly, as if an old woman in a white cap were going the rounds of my body, slowly the windows are closed and my organs drop back into place. Suddenly the lights flare up and the man in the white box whom I had taken for a Turkish officer turns out to be a woman with a flower pot on her head. There is a buzz now and all those who want to cough to their hearts' content. There is the noise of feet shuffling and seats slamming, the steady, frittering noise of people moving about aimlessly, of people fluttering their programs and pretending to read and then dropping their programs and scuffling under their seats, thankful for even the slightest accident which will prevent them from asking themselves what they were thinking about. Because if they knew they were thinking about nothing they would go mad. In the harsh glare of the lights they look at each other vacuously and there is a strange tenseness with which they stare at one another. And the moment the conductor raps again they fall back into a cataleptic state. They scratch themselves unconsciously or they remember suddenly a show window in which there was displayed a scarf or a hat, they remember every detail of that window with amazing clarity, but where it was exactly, that they can't recall, and that bothers them, keeps them wide awake, restless. And they listen now with redoubled attention because they are wide awake. And no matter how wonderful the music is they will not lose consciousness of that show window and that scarf that was hanging there. Or the hat. And this fierce attentiveness communicates itself, even the orchestra seems galvanized into an extraordinary alertness. The second number goes off like a top so fast indeed that when suddenly the music ceases and the lights go up some are stuck in their seats like carrots, their jaws working convulsively, and if you suddenly shouted in their ear Brahms, Beethoven, Mendeleev, Herzegovina, they would answer without thinking. By the time we get to the Debussy number, the atmosphere is completely poisoned. I find myself wondering what it feels like, during intercourse, to be a woman, whether the pleasure is keener, etc. Try to imagine something penetrating my groin, but have only a vague sensation of pain. I try to focus, but the music is too slippery. I can think of nothing but a vase slowly turning and the figures dropping off into space. Finally there is only light turning, and how does light turn, I ask myself. The man next to me is sleeping soundly. He looks like a broker, with his big paunch and his waxed mustache. I like him thus. I like especially that big paunch and all that went into the making of it. Why shouldn't he sleep soundly? If he wants to listen, he can always rustle up the price of a ticket. I notice that the better dressed they are, the more soundly they sleep. They have an easy conscience, the rich. If a poor man dozes off, even for a few seconds, he feels mortified. He imagines that he has committed a crime against the composer. In the Spanish number, the house was electrified. Everybody sat on the edge of his seat. The drums woke them up. I thought when the drums started it would keep up forever. I expected to see people fall out of the boxes or throw their hats away. There was something heroic about it, and he could have driven us stark mad. Ravel, if he had wanted to. But that's not Ravel. Suddenly it all died down. It was as if he remembered, in the midst of his antics, that he had on a cutaway suit. He arrested himself. A great mistake, in my humble opinion. Art consists in going the full length. If you start with the drums, you have to end with dynamite, or TNT. Ravel sacrificed something for form, for a vegetable that people must digest before going to bed. My thoughts are spreading. The music is slipping away from me, now that the drums have ceased. People everywhere are composed to order. Under the exit light is a Werther, sunk in despair. He is leaning on his two elbows, his eyes are glazed. Near the door, huddled in a big cape, stands a Spaniard with a sombrero in his hand. He looks as if he were posing for the Balzac of Rodin. From the neck up he suggests Buffalo Bill. In the gallery opposite me, in the front row, sits a woman with her legs spread wide apart. She looks as though she had lockjaw, with her neck thrown back and dislocated. The woman with the red hat, who is dozing over the rail, marvelous if she were to have a hemorrhage. If suddenly she spilled a bucket full on those stiff shirts below. Imagine these bloody no-accounts going home from the concert with blood on their dikes. Sleep is the keynote. No one is listening anymore. Impossible to think and listen. Impossible to dream even when the music itself is nothing but a dream. A woman with white gloves holds a swan in her lap. The legend is that when Leda was fecundated she gave birth to twins. Everybody is giving birth to something. Everybody but the lesbian in the upper tier. Her head is uptilted, her throat wide open. She is all alert and tingling with the shower of sparks that burst from the radium symphony. Jupiter is piercing her ears. Little phrases from California, whales with big fins. Zanzibar, the Alcazar. When along the Guadalquivir there were 1,000 mosques a shimmer. deep in the icebergs. And the days all lilac. The money street with 2 white hitching posts. The gargoyles. The man with the Jaworski nonsense, the river lights, the... In America I had a number of Hindu friends, some good, some bad, some indifferent. Circumstances had placed me in a position where fortunately I could be of aid to them. I secured jobs for them, I harbored them, and I fed them when necessary. They were very grateful, I must say, so much so, in fact, that they made my life miserable with their attentions. 2 of them were saints, if I know what a saint is, particularly Gupt, who was found one morning with his throat cut from ear to ear. In a little boarding house in Greenwich Village he was found one morning stretched out stark naked on the bed, his flute beside him, and his throat gashed, as I say, from ear to ear. It was never discovered whether he had been murdered or whether he had committed suicide. But that's neither here nor there. I'm thinking back to the chain of circumstances which has brought me finally to Nanantate's place. Thinking how strange it is that I should have forgotten all about Nanantate until the other day when lying in a shabby hotel room on the Rue Cells. I'm lying there on the iron bed thinking what a zero I have become, what a cipher, what a nullity, when, bango, out pops the word, nonentity. That's what we called him in New York, nonentity. Mr. Nonentity. I'm lying on the floor now in that gorgeous suite of rooms he boasted of when he was in New York. Nanantate is playing the Good Samaritan. He has given me a pair of itchy blankets, horse blankets they are, in which I curl up on the dusty floor. There are little jobs to do every hour of the day, that is, if I am foolish enough to remain indoors. In the morning he wakes me rudely in order to have me prepare the vegetables for his lunch, onions, garlic, beans, etc. His friend KP warns me not to eat the food, he says. It's bad. Bad or good, what difference? Food. That's all that matters. For a little food I am quite willing to sweep his carpets with a broken broom, to wash his clothes and to scrape the crumbs off the floor as soon as he has finished eating. He's become absolutely immaculate since my arrival. Everything has to be dusted now, the chairs must be arranged a certain way. The clock must ring, the toilet must flush properly. A crazy Hindu if ever there was one. And parsimonious 116 as a string bean. I'll have a great laugh over it when I get out of his clutches, but just now I'm a prisoner, a man without caste, an untouchable. If I fail to come back at night and roll up in the horse blankets, he says to me on arriving, "Oh, so you didn't die then? I thought you had died." And though he knows I'm absolutely penniless, he tells me every day about some cheap room he has just discovered in the neighborhood. But I can't take a room yet, you know that, I say. And then, blinking his eyes like a chink, he answers smoothly, "Oh, yes, I forgot that you had no money." I am always forgetting, Andre. But when the cable comes, when Miss Mona sends you the money, then you will come with me to look for a room, at an inn. The next breath he urges me to stay as long as I wish, 6 months, 7 months, Andre, you are very good for me here. Nanantate is one of the Hindus I never did anything for in America. He represented himself to me as a wealthy merchant, a pearl merchant, with A luxurious suite of rooms on the Rue Lafayette, Paris, a villa in Bombay, a bungalow in Darjeeling. I could see from the first glance that he was a half-wit, but then half-wits sometimes have the genius to amass a fortune. I didn't know that he paid his hotel bill in New York by leaving a couple of fat pearls in the proprietor's hands. It seems amusing to me now that this little duck once swaggered about the lobby of that hotel in New York with an ebony cane, bossing the bellhops around, ordering luncheons for his guests, calling up the porter for theater tickets, denting a taxi by the day, etc., etc., all without a sou in his pocket. Just a string of fat pearls around his neck which he cashed one by one as time wore on. And the fatuous way he used to pat me on the back, thank me for being so good to the Hindu boys. They are all very intelligent boys, Andre, very intelligent. Telling me that the good Lord so-and-so would repay me for my kindness. That explains now why they used to giggle so, these intelligent Hindu boys, when I suggested that they touch Nanante tea for a 5-spot. Curious now how the good Lord so-and-so is requiting me for my benevolence. I'm nothing but a slave to this fat little duck. I'm at his beck and call continually. He needs me here, he tells me so to my face. When he goes to the crap can he shouts, Andre, bring me a pitcher of water. Please. I must wipe myself. He wouldn't think of using toilet paper. Nanantati must be against his religion. No, he calls for a pitcher of water. And a rag. He's delicate, the fat little duck. Sometimes when I'm drinking a cup of pale tea in which he has dropped a rose leaf, he comes alongside of me and lets a loud fart, right in my face. He never says excuse me. The word must be missing from his Gujarati dictionary. The day I arrived at Nanantati's apartment he was in the act of performing his ablutions, that is to say, he was standing over a dirty bowl trying to work his crooked arm around toward the back of his neck. Beside the bowl was a brass goblet which he used to change the water. He requested me to be silent during the ceremony. I sat there silently, as I was bidden, and watched him as he sang and prayed and spat now and then into the wash bowl. So, this is the wonderful suite of rooms he talked about in New York. The Rue Lafayette. It sounded like an important street to me back there in New York. I thought only millionaires and pearl merchants inhabited the street. It sounds wonderful, the Rue Lafayette, when you're on the other side of the water. So does Fifth Avenue, when you're over here. One can't imagine what dumps there are on these swell streets. Anyway, here I am at last, sitting in the gorgeous suite of rooms on the Rue Lafayette. And this crazy duck with his crooked arm is going through the ritual of washing himself. The chair on which I'm sitting is broken, the bedstead is falling apart, the wallpaper is in tatters, there is an open valise under the bed crammed with dirty wash. From where I sit I can glance at the miserable courtyard down below where the aristocracy of the Rue Lafayette sit and smoke their clay pipes. I wonder now, as he chants the doxology, what that bungalow in Darjeeling looks like. It's interminable, his chanting and praying. He explains to me that he is obliged to wash in a certain prescribed way. His religion demands it. But on Sundays he takes a bath in the tin tub. The great I am will wink at that, he says. When he's dressed he goes to the cupboard, kneels before a little idol on the third shelf, and repeats the Mumbo jumbo. If you pray like that every day, he says, nothing will happen to you. The good Lord what's his name never forgets an obedient servant. And then he shows me the crooked arm which he got in a taxi accident on a day doubtless when he had neglected to rehearse the complete song and dance. His arm looks like a broken compass, it's not an arm anymore, but a knuckle bone with a shank attached. Since the arm has been repaired he has developed a pair of swollen glands in the armpit, fat little glands. Exactly like a dog's testicles. While bemoaning his plight he remembers suddenly that the doctor had recommended a more liberal diet. He begs me at once to sit down and make up a menu with plenty of fish and meat. And what about oysters, André for le petit frère? But all this is only to make an impression on me. He hasn't the slightest intention of buying himself oysters, or meat, or fish. Not as long as I am there, at least. For the time being we are going to nourish ourselves on lentils and rice and all the dry foods he has stored away in the attic. And the butter he bought last week, that won't go to waste either. When he commences to cure the butter the smell is unbearable. I used to run out at first, when he started frying the butter, but now I stick it out. He'd be only too delighted if he could make me vomit up my meal. That would be something else to put away in the cupboard along with the dry bread and the moldy cheese and the little grease cakes that he makes himself out of the stale milk and the rancid butter. For the last 5 years, so it seems, he hasn't done a stroke of work, hasn't turned over a penny. Business has gone to smash. He talks to me about pearls in the Indian Ocean, big fat ones on which you can live for a lifetime. The Arabs are ruining the business, he says. But meanwhile he prays to the Lord so and so every day, and that sustains him. He's on a marvelous footing with the deity, knows just how to cajole him, how to wheedle a few sous out of him. It's a pure commercial relationship. In exchange for that flummery before the cabinet every day he gets his ration of beans and garlic, to say nothing of the swollen testicles under his arm. He is confident that everything will turn out well in the end. The pearls will sell again some day, maybe 5 years hence, maybe 20 when the Lord Bomarum wishes it. And when the business goes, André, you will get 10% for writing the letters. But first, André, you must write the letter to find out if we can get credit from India. It will take about 6 months for an answer. Maybe 7 months, the boats are not fast in India. He has no conception of time at all, the little duck. When I ask him if he has slept well, he will say, "Ah, yes, André, I sleep very well. I sleep sometimes 92 hours in 3 days. Mornings he is usually too weak to do any work. His arm. That poor broken crutch of an arm. I wonder sometimes when I see him twisting it around the back of his neck how he will ever get it into place again. If it weren't for that little paunch he carries he'd remind me of one of those contortionists at the Cirque Madrano. All he needs is to break a leg. When he sees me sweeping the carpet, when he sees what a cloud of dust I raise, he begins to cluck like a pygmy. Good. Very good, André. And now I will pick up the knots. That means that there are a few crumbs of dust which I have overlooked. It is a polite way he has of being sarcastic. Afternoons there are always a few cronies from the pearl market dropping in to pay him a visit. They're all very suave, butter-tongued bastards with soft, doe-like eyes. They sit around the table drinking the perfumed tea with a loud, hissing noise while Nanante jumps up and down like a jack in the box or points to a crumb on the floor and says in his smooth slippery voice, "Will you please to pick that up, Andre?" When the guests arrive he goes unctuously to the cupboard and gets out the dry crusts of bread which he toasted maybe a week ago and which taste strongly now of the moldy wood. Not a crumb is thrown away. If the bread gets too sour he takes it downstairs to the concierge who, so he says, has been very kind to him. According to him, the concierge is delighted to get the stale bread. She makes bread pudding with it. One day my friend Anatole came to see me. Nanante was delighted. Insisted that Anatole stay for tea. Insisted that he try little grease cakes and the stale bread. "You must come every day," he says, "and teach me Russian. Fine language, Russian. I want to speak it." "How do you say that again, Andre Borscht?" "You will write that down for me, please, Andre. And I must write it on the typewriter, no less, so that he can observe my technique." He bought the typewriter, after he had collected on the bad arm. Because the doctor recommended it as a good exercise. But he got tired of the typewriter shortly. It was an English typewriter. When he learned that Anatole played the mandolin he said, "Very good. You must come every day and teach me the music. I will buy a mandolin as soon as business is better. It is good for my arm." The next day he borrows a phonograph from the concierge. "You will please teach me to dance, Andre. My stomach is too big." I am hoping that he will buy a porterhouse steak some day so that I can say to him, "You will please bite it for me, Mr. Nonentity. My teeth are not strong." As I said a moment ago, ever since my arrival he has become extraordinarily meticulous. "Yesterday," he says, "you made 3 mistakes, Andre. First, you forgot to close the toilet door and so all night it makes boom boom. Second, you left the kitchen window open and so the window is cracked this morning. And you forgot to put out the milk bottle. Always you will put out the milk bottle, please, before you go to bed, and in the morning you will please bring in the bread." Every day his friend KP drops in to see if any visitors have arrived from India. He waits for Nanante to go out and then he scurries to the cupboard and devours the sticks of bread that are hidden away in a glass jar. The food is no good, he insists, but he puts it away like a rat. KP is a scrounger, a sort of human tick who fastens himself to the hide of even the poorest compatriot. From KP's standpoint, they are all nabobs. For a Manila cheroot and the price of a drink he will suck any Hindu's ass. A Hindu's, mind you, but not an Englishman's. He has the address of every whorehouse in Paris, and the rates. Even from the 10 franc points he gets his little commission. And he knows the shortest way to any place you want to go. He will ask you first if you want to go by taxi. If you say no, he will suggest the bus, and if that is too high then the tramway or the metro. Or he will offer to walk you there and save a franc or two, knowing very well that it will be necessary to pass a tobacco on the way and that you will please be so good as to buy me a little cheroot. KP is interesting, in a way, because he has absolutely no ambition except to get a fuck every night. Every penny he makes, and they are damned few, he squanders in the dance halls. He has a wife and 8 children in Bombay, but that does not prevent him from proposing marriage to any little femme de chambre who is stupid and credulous enough to be taken in by him. He has a little room on the Rue Condorcet for which he pays 60 francs a month. He papered it all himself. Very proud of it, too. He uses violet-colored ink in his fountain pen because it lasts longer. He shines his own shoes, presses his own pants, does his own laundry. For a little cigar, a cheroot, if you please, he will escort you all over Paris. If you stop to look at a shirt or a collar button, his eyes flash. Don't buy it here, he will say. They ask too much. I will show you a cheaper place. And before you have time to think about it, he will whisk you away and deposit you before another shop window where there are the same day and shirts and collar buttons. Maybe it's the very same store, but you don't know the difference. When KP hears that you want to buy something, his soul becomes animated. He will ask you so many questions and drag you to so many places that you are bound to get thirsty and ask him to have a drink, whereupon you will discover to your amazement that you are again standing in a tabac, maybe the same tabac. And KP is saying again in that small unctuous voice, "Will you please be so good as to buy me a little cheroot? No matter what you propose doing, even if it's only to walk around the corner, KP will economize for you. KP will show you the shortest way, the cheapest place, the biggest dish, because whatever you have to do you must pass a tabac. And whether there is a revolution or a lockout or a quarantine, KP must be at the Moulin Rouge or the Olympia or the Ange Rouge when the music strikes up. The other day he brought a book for me to read. It was about a famous suit between a holy man and the editor of an Indian paper. The editor, it seems, had openly accused the holy man of leading a scandalous life. He went further, and accused the holy man of being diseased. KP says it must have been the great French pox, but Nanantati avers that it was the Japanese clap. For Nanantati everything has to be a little exaggerated. At any rate, says Nanantati cheerily, you will please tell me what it says, Andre. I can't read the book, it hurts my arm. Then, by way of encouraging me, it is a fine book about the fucking, Andre. KP has brought it for you. He thinks about nothing but the girls. So many girls he fucks just like Krishna. We don't believe in that business, Andre. A little later he takes me upstairs to the attic, which is loaded down with tin cans and crap from India wrapped in burlap and firecracker paper. Here is where I bring the girls, he says. And then rather wistfully, I am not a very good fucker, Andre. I don't screw the girls anymore. I hold them in my arms and I say the words. I like only to say the words now. It isn't necessary to listen any further. I know that he is going to tell me about his arm. I can see him lying there with that broken hinge dangling from the side of the bed. But to my surprise he adds, I am no good for the fucking, Andre. I never was a very good fucker. My brother, he is good. 3 times a day. Every day. And KP, he is good just like Krishna. His mind is fixed now on the fucking business. Downstairs, in the little room where he kneels before the open cabinet, he explains to me how it was when he was rich and his wife and children were here. On holidays he would take his wife to the house of all nations and hire a room for the night. Every room was appointed in a different style. His wife liked it there very much. A wonderful place for the fucking, Andre. I know all the rooms. The walls of the little room in which we are sitting are crammed with photographs. Every branch of the family is represented, it is like a cross section of the Indian Empire. For the most part the members of this genealogical tree look like withered leaves, the women are frail and they have a startled, frightened look in their eyes, the men have a keen, intelligent look, like educated chimpanzees. They are all there, about 90 of them, with their white bullocks, their dung cakes, their skinny legs, their old-fashioned spectacles. In the background, now and then, one catches a glimpse of the parched soil, of a crumbling pediment, of an idol with crooked arms, a sort of human centipede. There is something so fantastic, so incongruous about this gallery that one is reminded inevitably of the great spawn of temples which stretch from the Himalayas to the tip of Ceylon, a vast jumble of architecture, staggering in beauty and at the same time monstrous, hideously monstrous because the fecundity which seethes and ferments in the myriad ramifications of design seems to have exhausted the very soil of India itself. Looking at the seething hive of figures which swarm the facades of the temples, one is overwhelmed by the potency of these dark, handsome people who mingled their mysterious streams in a sexual embrace that has lasted 30 centuries or more. These frail men and women with piercing eyes who stare out of the photographs seem like the emaciated shadows of those virile, massive figures who incarnated themselves in stone and fresco from one end of India to the other in order that the heroic myths of the races who here intermingled should remain forever entwined in the hearts of their countrymen. When I look at only a fragment of these spacious dreams of stone, these toppling, sluggish edifices studded with gems, coagulated with human sperm, I am overwhelmed by the dazzling splendor of those imaginative flights which enabled 500 million people of diverse origins to thus incarnate the most fugitive expressions of their longing. It is a strange, inexplicable medley of feelings which assails me now as Nanante T prattles on about the sister who died in childbirth. There she is on the wall, a frail, timid thing of 12 or 13 clinging to the arm of a dotard. At 10 years of age she was given in wedlock to this old roué, who had already buried 5 wives. She had 7 children, only one of whom survived her. She was given to the aged gorilla in order to keep the pearls in the family. As she was passing away, so Nanante T puts it, she whispered to the doctor, "I am tired of this fucking. I don't want to fuck anymore, doctor." As he relates this to me he scratches his head solemnly with his withered arm. "The fucking business is bad, Andre," he says. "But I will give you a word that will always make you lucky, you must say it every day, over and over, 1,000,000 times you must say it. It is the best word there is, Andre, say it now. To Maharumoma. To Marabou. No, Andre, like this. To Maharumoma. To Mamabomba. No, Andre, like this." But what with the murky light, the botchy print, the tattered cover, the jig-jagged page, the fumbling fingers, the fox-trotting fleas, the lie-bed lice, the scum on his tongue, the drop in his eye, the lump in his throat, the drink in his pottle, the itch in his palm, the wail of his wind, the grief from his breath, the fog of his brain fog, the tick of his conscience, the height of his rage, the gush of his fundament, the fire in his gorge, the tickle of his tail. The rats in his garret, the hullabaloo and the dust in his ears, since it took him a month to steal a march, he was hard set to memorize more than a word a week. I suppose I would never have gotten out of Nanantate's clutches if fate hadn't intervened. One night, as luck would have it, KP asked me if I wouldn't take one of his clients to a whorehouse nearby. The young man had just come from India and he had not very much money to spend. He was one of Gandhi's men, one of that little band who made the historic march to the sea during the Salt Trouble. A very gay disciple of Gandhi's, I must say, despite the vows of abstinence he had taken. Evidently he hadn't looked at a woman for ages. It was all I could do to get him as far as the Rue Lafmere. He was like a dog with his tongue hanging out. And a pompous, vain little devil to boot. He had decked himself out in a corduroy suit, a beret, a cane, a Windsor tie. He had bought himself 2 fountain pens, a Kodak, and some fancy underwear. The money he was spending was a gift from the merchants of Bombay. They were sending him to England to spread the gospel of Gandhi. Once inside Miss Hamilton's joint he began to lose his sang-froid, when suddenly he found himself surrounded by a bevy of naked women. He looked at me in consternation. "Pick one out," I said. "You can have your choice." He had become so rattled that he could scarcely look at them. "You do it for me," he murmured, blushing violently. I looked them over coolly and picked out a plump young wench who seemed full of feathers. We sat down in the reception room and waited for the drinks. The madam wanted to know why I didn't take a girl also. "Yes, you take one too," said the young Hindu. "I don't want to be alone with her." So the girls were brought in again and I chose one for myself, a rather tall, thin one with melancholy eyes. We were left alone, the 4 of us, in the reception room. After a few moments my young Gandhi leans over and whispers something in my ear. "Sure, if you like her better, take her," I said, and so, rather awkwardly and considerably embarrassed, I explained to the girls that we would like to switch. I saw it once that we had made a faux pas, but by now my young friend had become gay and lecherous and nothing would do but to get upstairs quickly and have it over with. We took adjoining rooms with a connecting door between. I think my companion had in mind to make another switch once he had satisfied his sharp, gnawing hunger. At any rate, no sooner had the girls left the room to prepare themselves than I hear him knocking on the door. "Where is the toilet, please?" he asks. Not thinking that it was anything serious, I urge him to do in the bidet. The girls return with towels in their hands. I hear him giggling in the next room. As I'm putting on my pants, suddenly I hear a commotion in the next room. The girl is bawling him out, calling him a pig. A dirty little pig. I can't imagine what he has done to warrant such an outburst. I'm standing there with one foot in my trousers listening attentively. He's trying to explain to her in English, raising his voice louder and louder until it becomes a shriek. I hear a door slam and in another moment the madam bursts into my room, her face as red as a beet, her arms gesticulating wildly. "You ought to Be ashamed of yourself, she screams, bringing a man like that to my place. He's a barbarian, he's a pig, he's a... My companion is standing behind her, in the doorway, a look of utmost discomfiture on his face. What did you do? I ask. What did he do? Yells the madam. I'll show you. Come here. And, grabbing me by the arm, she drags me into the next room. There. There. She screams, pointing to the bidet. Come on, let's get out, says the Hindu boy. Wait a minute, you can't get out as easily as all that. The madam is standing by the bidet, fuming and spitting. The girls are standing there too, with towels in their hands. The 5 of us are standing. They're looking at the bidet. There are 2 enormous turds floating in the water. The madam bends down and puts a towel over it. Frightful! Frightful! She wails. Never have I seen anything like this. A pig. A dirty little pig. The Hindu boy looks at me reproachfully. You should have told me. He says. I didn't know it wouldn't go down. I asked you where to go and you told me to use that. He is almost in tears. Finally the madam takes me to one side. She has become a little more reasonable now. After all, it was a mistake. Perhaps the gentleman would like to come downstairs and order another drink for the girls. It was a great shock to the girls. They are not used to such things. And if the good gentleman will be so kind as to remember the femme de chambre. It is not so pretty for me femme de chambre, that mess, that ugly mess. She shrugs her shoulders and winks her eye. A lamentable incident. But an accident. If the gentleman will wait here a few moments, the maid will bring the drinks. Would the gentleman like to have some champagne? Yes? I'd like to get out of here, says the Hindu boy weakly. Don't you feel so badly about it, says the madam. It is all over now. Mistakes will happen sometimes. Next time you will ask for the toilet. She goes on about the toilet, one on every floor, it seems. And a bathroom, too. I have lots of English clients, she says. They are all gentlemen. They. Gentleman is a Hindu? Charming people, the Hindus. So intelligent. So handsome. When we get into the street, the charming young gentleman is almost weeping. He is sorry now that he bought a corduroy suit and the cane and the fountain pens. He talks about the 8 vows that he took, the control of the palate, etc. On the march to Dandi, even a plate of ice cream it was forbidden to take. He tells me about the spinning wheel. How the little band of satyagrahists imitated the devotion of their master. He relates with pride how he walked beside the master and conversed with him. I have the illusion of being in the presence of one of the 12 disciples. During the next few days we see a good deal of each other. There are interviews to be arranged with the newspaper men and lectures to be given to the Hindus of Paris. It is amazing to see how these spineless devils order one another about, amazing also to see how ineffectual they are in all that concerns practical affairs. And the jealousy and the intrigues, the petty, sordid rivalries. Wherever there are 10 Hindus together, there is India with her sects and schisms, her racial, lingual, religious, political antagonisms. In The person of Gandhi they are experiencing for a brief moment the miracle of unity, but when he goes there will be a crash, an utter relapse into that strife and chaos so characteristic of the Indian people. The young Hindu, of course, is optimistic. He has been to America and he has been contaminated by the cheap idealism of the Americans. Contaminated by the ubiquitous bathtub, the 5 and 10 cent store brick. A brack, the bustle, the efficiency, the machinery, the high wages, the free libraries, etc., etc. His ideal would be to Americanize India. He is not at all pleased with Gandhi's retrogressive mania. Forward, he says, just like a Y.M.C.A. man. As I listen to his tales of America I see how absurd it is to expect of Gandhi that miracle which will derail the trend of destiny. India's enemy is not England, but America. India's enemy is the time spirit. The hand which cannot be turned back. Nothing will avail to offset this virus, which is poisoning the whole world. America is the very incarnation of doom. She will drag the whole world down to the bottomless pit. He thinks the Americans are a very gullible people. He tells me about the credulous souls who succored him there, the Quakers, the Unitarians, the Theosophists, the New Thoughters, the Seventh-day Adventists, etc. He knew where to sail his boat, this bright young man. He knew how to make the tears come to his eyes at the right moment, he knew how to take up a collection, how to appeal to the minister's wife, how to make love to the mother and daughter at the same time. To look at him you would think him a saint. And he is a saint, in the modern fashion, a contaminated saint who talks in one breath of love, brotherhood, bathtubs, sanitation, efficiency, etc. The last night of his sojourn in Paris is given up to the fucking business. He has had a full program all day: conferences, cablegrams, interviews, photographs for the newspapers, affectionate farewells, advice to the faithful, etc., etc. At dinner time he decides to lay aside his troubles. He orders champagne with the meal, he snaps his fingers at the garçon and behaves in general like the boorish little peasant that he is. And since he has had a belly full of all the good places, he suggests now that I show him something more primitive. He would like to go to a very cheap place, order 2 or 3 girls at once. I steer him along the Boulevard de la Chapelle, warning him all the while to be careful of his pocketbook. Around Aubervilliers we duck into a cheap dive and immediately we've got a flock of them on our hands. In a few minutes he's dancing with a naked wench, a huge blonde with creases in her jowls. I can see her ass reflected a dozen times in the mirrors that line the room, and those dark, bony fingers of his clutching her tenaciously. The table is full of beer glasses, the mechanical piano is wheezing and gasping. The girls who are unoccupied are sitting placidly on the leather benches, scratching themselves peacefully just like a family of chimpanzees. There is a sort of subdued pandemonium in the air. A note of repressed violence, as if the awaited explosion required the advent of some utterly minute detail, something microscopic but thoroughly unpremeditated, completely unexpected. In that sort of half reverie which permits one to participate in an event and yet remain quite aloof, the little detail which was lacking began obscurely but insistently to coagulate, to assume a freakish, crystalline form, like the frost which gathers on the window pane. And like those frost patterns which seem so bizarre, so utterly free and fantastic in design, but which are nevertheless determined by the most rigid laws, so this sensation which commenced to take form inside me seemed also to be giving obedience to ineluctable laws. My whole being was responding to the dictates of an ambience which it had never before experienced. That which I could call myself seemed to be contracting, condensing, shrinking from the stale, customary boundaries of the flesh whose perimeter knew only the modulations of the nerve ends. And the more substantial, the more solid the core of me became, the more delicate and extravagant appeared the close, palpable reality out of which I was being squeezed. In the measure that I became more and more metallic, in the same measure the scene before my eyes became inflated. The state of tension was so finely drawn now that the introduction of a single foreign particle, even a microscopic particle, as I say, would have shattered everything. For the fraction of a second perhaps I experienced that utter clarity which the epileptic, it is said, is given to know. In that moment I lost completely the illusion of time and space, the world unfurled its drama simultaneously along a meridian which had no axis. In this sort of hair-trigger eternity I felt that everything was justified, supremely justified. I felt the wars inside me that had left behind this pulp and rack, I felt the crimes that were seething here to emerge tomorrow in blatant screamers. I felt the misery that was grinding itself out with pestle and mortar, the long, dull misery that dribbles away in dirty handkerchiefs. On the meridian of time there is no injustice, there is only the poetry of motion creating the illusion of truth and drama. If at any moment anywhere one comes face to face with the absolute, that great sympathy which makes men like Gautama and Jesus seem divine freezes away. The monstrous thing is not that men have created roses out of this dung heap, but that, for some reason or other, they should want roses. For some reason or other man looks for the miracle, and to accomplish it he will wade through blood. He will debauch himself with ideas, he will reduce himself to a shadow if for only 1 second of his life he can close his eyes to the hideousness of reality. Everything is endured, disgrace, humiliation, poverty, war, crime, ennui, in the belief that overnight something will occur, a miracle, which will render life tolerable. And all the while a meter is running inside and there is no hand that can reach in there and shut it off. All the while someone is eating the bread of life and drinking the wine, some dirty fat cockroach of a priest who hides away in the cellar guzzling it, while up above in the light of the street a phantom host touches the lips and the blood is pale as water. And out of the endless torment and misery no miracle comes forth, no microscopic vestige even of relief. Only ideas, pale, attenuated ideas which have to be fattened by slaughter, ideas which come forth like bile, like the guts of a pig when the carcass is ripped open. And so I think what a miracle it would be if this miracle which man attends eternally should turn out to be nothing more than these two enormous turds which the faithful disciple dropped in the bidet. What if at the last moment, when the banquet table is set and the cymbals clash, there should appear suddenly, and wholly without warning, a silver platter on which even the blind could see that there is nothing more, and nothing less, than two enormous lumps of shit. That, I believe, would be more miraculous than anything which man has looked forward to. It would be miraculous because it would be undreamed of. It would be more miraculous than even the wildest dream because anybody could imagine the possibility but nobody ever has, and probably nobody ever again will. Somehow the realization that nothing was to be hoped for had a salutary effect upon me. For weeks and months, for years, in fact, all my life I had been looking forward to something happening, some extrinsic event that would alter my life, and now suddenly, inspired by the absolute hopelessness of everything, I felt relieved as though a great burden had been lifted from my shoulders. At dawn I parted company with the young Hindu, after touching him for a few francs, enough for a room. Walking toward Montparnasse I decided to let myself drift with the tide, to make not the least resistance to fate, no matter in what form it presented itself. Nothing that had happened to me thus far had been sufficient to destroy me, nothing had been destroyed except my illusions. I myself was intact. The world was intact. Tomorrow there might be a revolution, a plague, an earthquake, tomorrow there might not be left a single soul to whom one could turn for sympathy, for aid, for faith. It seemed to me that the great calamity had already manifested itself, that I could be no more truly alone. Then at this very moment, I made up my mind that I would hold on to nothing, that I would expect nothing, that henceforth I would live as an animal, a beast of prey, a rover, a plunderer. Even if war were declared, and it were my lot to go, I would grab the bayonet and plunge it up to the hilt. And if rape were the order of the day, then rape I would, and with a vengeance. At this very moment, in the quiet dawn of a new day, was not the earth giddy with crime and distress? Had one single element of man's nature been altered, vitally, fundamentally altered, by the incessant march of history? By what he calls the better part of his nature, man has been betrayed, that is all. At the extreme limits of his spiritual being man finds himself again naked as a savage. When he finds God, as it were, he has been picked clean, he is a skeleton. One must burrow into life again in order to put on flesh. The word must become flesh, the soul thirsts on whatever crumb my eye fastens, I will pounce and devour. If to live is the paramount thing, then I will live, even if I must become a cannibal. Heretofore I have been trying to save my precious hide, trying to preserve the few pieces of meat that hid my bones. I am done with that. I have reached the limits of endurance. My back is to the wall, I can retreat no further. As far as history goes, I am dead. If there is something beyond, I shall have to bounce back. I have found God, but he is insufficient. I am only spiritually dead. Physically, I am alive. Morally, I am free. The world which I have departed is a menagerie. The dawn is breaking on a new world, a jungle world in which the lean spirits roam with sharp claws. If I am a hyena, I am a lean and hungry one. I go forth to fatten myself. At 1:30 I called on Van Norden, as per agreement. He had warned me that if he didn't answer it would mean that he was sleeping with someone. Probably his Georgia cunt. Anyway, there he was, tucked away comfortably, but with an air of weariness as usual. He wakes up, cursing himself, or cursing the job, or cursing life. He wakes up utterly bored and discomfited, chagrined to think that he did not die overnight. I sit down by the window and give him what encouragement I can. It is tedious work. 1. Has to actually coax him out of bed. Mornings he means by mornings. Anywhere between 1 and 5 p.m. Mornings, as I say, he gives himself up to reveries. Mostly it is about the past he dreams. About his cunts. He endeavors to recall how they felt, what they said to him at certain critical moments, where he laid them, and so on. And as he lies there, grinning and cursing, he manipulates his fingers in that curious, bored way of his, as though to convey the impression that his disgust is too great for words. Over the bedstead hangs a douchebag which he keeps for emergencies. For the virgins whom he tracks down like a sleuth. Even after he has slept with one of these mythical creatures, he will still refer to her as a virgin, and almost never by name. My virgin, he will say, just as he says my Georgia cunt. When he goes to the toilet he says, if my Georgia cunt calls, tell her to wait. Say I said so. And listen, you can have her if you like. I'm tired of her. He takes a squint at the weather and heaves a deep sigh. If it's rainy, he says, God damn this fucking climate, it makes one morbid. And if the sun is shining brightly, he says, God damn that fucking sun, it makes you blind. As he starts to shave, he suddenly remembers that there is no clean towel. God damn this fucking hotel, they're too stingy to give you a clean towel. Every day. No matter what he does or where he goes, things are out of joint. Either it's the fucking country or the fucking job, or else it's some fucking cunt who's put him on the blink. My teeth are all rotten, he says, gargling his throat. It's the fucking bread they give you to eat here. He opens his mouth wide and pulls his lower lip down. See that? Pulled out 6 teeth yesterday. Soon I'll have to get another plate. That's what you get working for a living. When I was on the bum, I had all my teeth, my eyes were bright and clear. Look at me now. It's a wonder I can make a cunt anymore. Jesus, what I'd like is to find some rich cunt. Like that cute little prick, Carl. Did he ever show you the letters she sends him? Who is she, do you know? He wouldn't tell me her name, the bastard. He's afraid I might take her away from him. He gargles his throat again and then he takes a long look at the cavities. You're lucky, he says ruefully. You've got friends, at least. I haven't anybody, except that cute little prick who drives me bats about his rich cunt. Listen, he says, do you happen to know a cunt by the name of Norma? She hangs around the dome all day. I think she's queer. I had her up here yesterday, tickling her ass. She wouldn't let me do a thing. I had her on the bed. I even had her drawers off, and then I got disgusted. Jesus, I can't bother struggling that way anymore. It isn't worth it. Either they do or they don't. It's foolish to waste time wrestling with them. While you're struggling with a little bitch like that, there may be a dozen cunts on the terrace just dying to be laid. It's a fact. They all come over here to get laid. They think it's sinful here, the poor boobs. Some of these school teachers from out west, they're honestly virgins. I mean it. They sit around on their kin all day thinking about it. You don't have to work over them very much. They're dying for it. I had a married woman the other day who told me she hadn't had a lay for 6 months. Can you imagine that? Jesus, she was hot. I thought she'd tear the cock off me. And groaning all the time. Do You? Do you? She kept saying that all the time, like she was nuts. And you? Know what that bitch wanted to do? She wanted to move in here. Imagine that. Asking me if I loved her. I didn't even know her name. I never know their names. I don't want to. The married ones. Christ, if you saw all the married cunts I bring up here, you'd never have any more illusions. They're worse than the virgins, the married ones. They don't wait for you to start things, they fish it out for you themselves. And then they talk about love afterwards. It's disgusting. I tell you, I'm actually beginning to hate cunt. He looks out the window again. It's drizzling. It's been drizzling this way for the last 5 days. Are we going to the dome, Joe? I call him Joe because he calls me Joe. When Carl is with us, he is Joe too. Everybody is Joe because it's easier that way. It's also a pleasant reminder not to take yourself too seriously. Anyway, Joe doesn't want to go to the dome, he owes too much money there. He wants to go to the cupola. Wants to take a little walk first around the block. But it's raining, Joe. I know, but what the hell? I've got to have my constitutional. I've got to wash the dirt out of my belly. When he says this, I have the impression that the whole world is wrapped up there inside his belly, and that it's rotting there. As he's putting on his things, he falls back again into a semi-comatose state. He stands there with one arm in his coat sleeve and his hat on ass ways, and he begins to dream aloud about the Riviera, about the sun, about lazing one's life away. All I ask of life, he says, is a bunch of books, a bunch of dreams, and a bunch of cunt. As he mumbles this meditatively, he looks at me with the softest, the most insidious smile. Do you like that smile? He says. And then disgustedly, Jesus, if I could only find some rich cunt to smile at that way. Only a rich cunt can save me now, he says with an air of utmost weariness. One gets tired of chasing after new cunts all the time. It gets mechanical. The trouble is, you see, I can't fall in love. I'm too much of an egoist. Women only help me to dream, that's all. It's a vice, like drink or opium. I've got to have a new one every day, if I don't I get morbid. I think too much. Sometimes I'm amazed at myself, how quick I pull it off and how little it really means. I do it automatically, like sometimes I'm not thinking about a woman at all, but suddenly I notice a woman looking at me and then bango. It starts all over again. Before I know what I'm doing, I've got her up to the room. I don't even remember what I say to them. I bring them up to the room, give them a pat on the ass, and before I know what it's all about, it's over. It's like a dream. Do you know what I mean? He hasn't much use for the French girls. Can't stand them. Either they want money or they want you to marry them. At bottom they're all whores. I'd rather wrestle with a virgin, he says. They give you a little illusion. They put up a fight at least. Just the same, as we glance over the terrace, there is hardly a whore inside whom he hasn't fucked at some time or other. Standing at the bar, he points them out to me, one by one, goes over them anatomically, describes their good points and their bad. They're all frigid, he says. And then begins to mold his hands, thinking of the nice, juicy virgins who are just dying for it. In the midst of his reveries he suddenly arrests himself, and grabbing my arm excitedly he points to a whale of a woman who is just lowering herself into a seat. "There's my Danish cunt," he grunts. "See that ass? Danish. How? That woman loves it. She just begs me for it. Come over here, look at her. Now, from the side. Look at that ass, will you? It's enormous. I tell you, when she climbs over me I can hardly get my arms around it. It blots out the whole world. She makes me feel like a little bug crawling inside her. I don't know why I fall for her. I suppose it's that ass. It's so incongruous like. And the creases in it. You can't forget an ass like that. It's a fact, a solid fact. They others, they may bore you, or they may give you a moment's illusion, but this one with her ass. Zawi, you can't obliterate her, it's like going to bed with a monument on top of you." The Danish cunt seems to have electrified him. He's lost all his sluggishness. Now, his eyes are popping out of his head. And of course one thing reminds him of another. He wants to get out of the fucking hotel because the noise bothers him. He wants to write a book too so as to have something to occupy his mind. But then the goddamned job stands in the way. It takes it out of you, that fucking job. I don't want to write about Montparnasse. I want to write my life, my thoughts. I want to get the dirt out of my belly. Listen, get that one over there. I had her a long time ago. She used to be down near Les Halles. A funny bitch. She lay on the edge of the bed and pulled her dress up. Ever try it that way? Not bad. She didn't hurry me either. She just lay back and played with her hat while I slugged away at her. And when I come she says sort of bored like, "Are you through?" Like it didn't make any difference at all. Of course, it doesn't make any difference, I know that goddamn well, but the cold-blooded way she had, I sort of liked it. It was fascinating, you know? When she goes to wipe herself she begins to sing. Going out of the hotel she was still singing. Didn't even say au revoir. Walks off swinging her hat and humming to herself like, "That's a whore for you." A good lay though. I think I liked her better than my virgin. There's something depraved about screwing a woman who doesn't give a fuck about it. It heals your blood. And then, after a moment's meditation, can you imagine what she'd be like if she had any feelings? "Listen," he says, "I want you to come to the club with me tomorrow afternoon, there's a dance on." "I can't tomorrow, Joe. I promised to help Carl out." "Listen, forget that prick. I want you to do me a favor. It's like this." He commences to mold his hands again. "I've got a cunt lined up, she promised to stay with me on my night off.